Hello, Rank Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the number one checkout on the planet. And the not so secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello, Rank Squad, and welcome to Ranks FC. It's your favourite transatlantic football podcast, back for another week. My name's Jack Collins, and I'll be your host today. And joining me across the water, all the way from San Diego, as ever, it's Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Hello, mate. Yeah, I'm good. We're in pre-season now, aren't we?
I think we can fundamentally say we're in pre-season. For most of the European calendar, anyway.
It didn't work out if we've been in the 2025-26 campaign or not during the Club World Cup, because some people say we are, some people say we're not. But now
I think it depends where your perspective is.
Exactly.
Do you want that to be the first trophy of next year, or do you want it to be the last one of last year? I don't know. It depends who you are, I suppose. Xabi Alonso was very, very aggressively of the opinion that it was the last trophy of 2025, and why wouldn't he be?
Mm-hmm, exactly, yeah. Exactly that. But Maresca might be like, look, we've already got one trophy under our belts this season. Let's go. So, yeah, now we are into pre-season, and we'll see where this takes us. But, yeah, I think in things we love, we're going to talk about the final of the Club World Cup, aren't we? And even as two Fulham fans, we're willing to, we're willing to give them some flowers here, Chelsea.
Give Chelsea their due.
What they've been able to achieve, yeah.
Well, they deserve here, because they deserve immense props for this performance, and their performance, I think, throughout most of the Club World Cup. The fact that they've used this as a learning curve, as something to grow into and come out the end of it in a space where they've been able to put on such a dominant performance, not necessarily in terms of the stats, not in terms of possession, not in terms of shots, but in terms of their felt from about 20 minutes in, there was only one team going to win this game. There was no real moment where I was like, oh, here comes the comeback. It's on for PSG. And that takes a lot of doing. I have been prolific with my praise of Paris Saint-Germain over the course of this season. I didn't know how anybody was going to stop them. And there are elements of this. Obviously, there's two sides to every coin, right? And as brilliant as Chelsea were, PSG really not at the races. The lack of William Pacho, I thought, really hurt them in terms of defending in transition and in those big spaces. They were exposed time and time again by Chelsea overloading the flanks. But as bad as they were, and as much as they felt like they ran out a little bit of steam, the fact that Chelsea were able to grab this game by the scruff of the neck and impose themselves upon it so fundamentally, I think, is worthy of an incredible amount of praise. And look, Enzo Maresca has been criticised at times for being too sideways, too much crab football has been described to me, and for not being direct enough, not being physical enough, the things that Chelsea fans feel belong within the club's DNA. And this was a performance that strung all that together. I thought that what they did incredibly well was putting together a combination of the way that Bayern pressed PSG and made them feel uncomfortable at times, but also what Botafogo did in terms of sitting back, soaking up pressure and hitting them in physical one-on-one duels and taking those opportunities as well. So Maresca deserves immense credit here for his game plan, and the players deserve immense credit for the execution of it. I thought the way that Joao Pedro and Cole Palmer managed to kind of dovetail on that right flank, the way that they drifted in between positions and it allowed Palmer to get central, that allowed him to open up the opportunities to score those two brilliant goals. The second one in particular, absolutely outstanding. I thought that was really interesting. Malo Gusto has been much maligned by the Chelsea fan base for his mistakes from a defensive perspective, pushing up really, really high and getting in there. Marc Cucurella mastering the dark arts as usual. I thought that Moises Caicedo was a one-man wrecking ball in the middle of midfield, and behind him, Reece James playing in that defensive midfield slot, being able to control the game. His passing, his range of passing was exceptional, but also it allowed Caicedo to get a bit further forward and wreck in different ways in the midfield, and all of that pushed Enzo Fernandez up. And in games like this, it's quite nice to have him a little bit further away with a pivot behind him in order to be able to work forward and make things happen. So Maresca got this one absolutely spot on. And I thought that the way that Chelsea executed it and the way that they put a performance together like this will have pleased so many Chelsea fans, not just because they've gone and become world champions, but also in the manner in which they did it, to dominate a PSG side that have swept all comers, and to do it with physicality, to do it with direct football. Robert Sanchez playing out of the back and out of his hands, those kind of long balls down the right flank, absolutely spot on for most of this game. Now, we did a full podcast basically on the breakdown of the game on the Patreon, so I'm not going to go completely into it here, but I thought it was important to give Chelsea their due, because this was a real performance that might have been the coming of age performance for this Chelsea team.
Yeah, absolutely. It was like a bit of a Chelsea loving at one point on the Patreon, so that's rare. But it was also good, I mean, to get back to a traditional post-box session on Monday where we were able to actually just go through one game as well. Obviously, we talked about other stuff, but having one big game and a big cup final is like, it was like breaking down a Champions League takeaway or something. So that was cool. So look, to kind of build this Chelsea narrative into what we're talking about today, I mean, I think it's quite fitting to try to do that. We're going to talk about transformations from last season into the new one, and who's got the biggest one, and doesn't have to be positive necessarily, but I think Chelsea's would be. And Chelsea are transforming into something different now. You saw Levi Colwill talking about the fact that he believed they would win the Club World Cup, and then they did it. And he's saying now we'll do the same, have the same mindset for the Premier League and the Champions League. And I think that's interesting, but they are now the champions of the world. And like, their fans will have chants and songs about that. They will have flags about that. You know, irrelevant of the fact that most of the Chelsea fans I know who go to the games and stuff barely paid any attention to the tournament until it got to the last two games. Of course they're going to jump on this. Like, they can call themselves...
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
World champions.
Doing exactly the same.
Like, if nothing else, they can wind up everybody else by using it. So in that sense, Chelsea are transformed, because one of the big criticisms with all the money that they've spent is that it hasn't led to any glory. And now they do have a very shiny trophy in their cabinet. Whether it's a replica or not, we do not know. We do not know. That's still up in the air. Absolutely. But they also have £100 million on the back of winning this, which is very handy. Not that it's going to make too much of a dent, considering they've already spent over £1 billion, but it's handy, and maybe they'll go and spend it on somebody else. It wouldn't surprise me if we see them go in for Hugo Ekitike or something like that, even though he's being linked with Newcastle right now. It wouldn't surprise me if Chelsea were like, nah, let's go and do that. Let's go and spend the winning.
If they go and sign an Ekitike now, surely that spells the end for Nicholas Jackson. Like,
well, that's the scenario in which they would do that. Yeah, that is the scenario that would open that move up, obviously. But I think they'll find it hard to resist not spending their winnings because it's just in the nature, it's in the DNA. Like, they love it. They just love to spend money. Clearly, they love to win money too, because that's what they've just gone and done. But I do think that this Chelsea team now takes on a different mindset going into the Premier League season, because they might not be reigning Premier League champions, but they're reigning world champions. And they need to wear that badge quite literally with pride on their shirts and make it mean something. Because for a lot of us, we're like, you've beaten PSG in a one-off game where they just didn't perform because they are actually the best team in the world, not you. And Chelsea have to be like, well, that's not fair. Like we've proven ourselves in that tournament to be better than them. And we literally have the title. So we'll prove it to you. And I think, the resurgence of Cole Palmer was extremely interesting. He really fell off last season in terms of form, and it was surprising. When at 12 games at one point without a goal. I think he scored one Premier League goal from the 20th of January onwards. And it was all a bit odd. But I kept saying throughout the second half of last season, this won't happen. This won't continue, because Cole Palmer is a mentality monster. He's not fazed by things. He's too good mentally and physically to continue to be in a rut. And, it looked like I was wrong, because his performance has obviously got better for Chelsea, but there still wasn't the output. And then he turns up on a stage like this.
His underlying numbers were kind of fine throughout. It was just that kind of question over what happened with, the output. And look, part of that I think is important to note is probably the fact that teams started to double, treble down on Cole Palmer, because he felt like the only real creative fulcrum that Chelsea had. But suddenly you put a few more players in that side who have the ability to break games open, and things look very different. And look, Joao Pedro has had a major effect, obviously, in regards to that. And the way that the two of them combine is something that we're going to definitely keep an eye on. But also you've got suddenly the hard running of Liam Delap, and it's no longer, okay, Nicholas Jackson might get in behind. We know that they missed Nicholas Jackson through parts of the end of last season and not being able to create in the same kind of way. He looks like a man kind of playing for his place at the moment and kind of desperate to get to the place he wants to be. And I think that that's something that we should probably keep an eye on too. But I do think that as Chelsea add pieces and add creative pieces around Cole Palmer, who are also able to shoulder some of that burden, shoulder some of the load, it means that teams won't be able to do the same job, the 2-man, 3-man on Cole Palmer when he gets the ball. And when that changes, suddenly the game opens up for him to be able to have the effect again. And again, he's turned up and put a performance in a final. I think it's 7 goals in 6 finals now. It's the big occasions that seem to bring the best out of him. And I would be surprised if we see a lull of form that goes on for as long as that one did at the same time over the course of the next couple of seasons, never mind just the next one, because he has that ability to just turn it on a sixpence when it does come around and when the players around him feel like they're in the right spaces.
Yeah. I think that's totally fair. But yeah, so I think that it was a significant moment. I mean, obviously, as surprised as anyone was that PSG didn't go and become champions of the world themselves. But big performance from Chelsea. And I think it's a big statement in terms of where they're at now and where they can head. I still think it's going to be a huge task for them to retain consistency over almost quite literally a year to go and be crowned Premier League or Champions League winners. But they've shown that they've got something extra about them now. And I've been waiting to see that for quite a while under this ownership. And it seems that they might have an extra layer in them.
Just to finish off with a point to go back to what you said about Levi Colwell's comments, how pleased Chelsea fans will be to hear that, because there's obviously an element of, you have to be realistic with your own club, but Chelsea's DNA and Chelsea's kind of modern history, let's say post 2003, 2004, has been being in finals and winning them, right? It's been sort of getting there, whatever happened. And I think there was a lot of frustration with Enzo Maresca last season when, second in the Premier League, a couple of points behind Liverpool, and he's going, we're not in a title race. And look, maybe he's playing his own kind of cards of, let's protect myself. If I say silly things now that I don't really believe, we're getting held up. But people were frustrated with the aura that gave off. And suddenly you've got Levi Colwill coming in and being like, yeah, we're going to challenge for the Premier League. We're going to challenge for the Champions League. We've just won the Club World Cup. And I imagine that Chelsea fans who have grown up in this era of kind of constant success is maybe too much, but there's a successfulness that runs through it on a kind of yearly basis. And I think that it's kind of one of those phrases that you would use and then look back at and say, oh, actually, constant success is that trophy haul over the period of the last 20 years. That is an incredible amount of success for a club to have. And the fact that they were in those tournaments and in the kind of sharp end of them on a regular basis was taken as a bit of a given until the last few years. And in those few years, they were told, oh, we're going to change the entire way we operate. We're going to become a project. They didn't stick with any of the elements of the project. Now, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent is kind of not the point. The point is that you're changing the way that fans see football. You're trying to change the way that they operate within the club. And suddenly you've got one of the kind of academy prospects, someone who's come through and believed it and lived it, being like, yeah, we're going to challenge. Yeah, we're going to challenge for everything. Yeah, we feel like we can win the lot. That must be incredibly refreshing for Chelsea fans, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And, as a fan base, once they have a team they believe in, they are very good at showing that their belief in that team and getting behind them. And, it's been a struggle to find an identity, to understand what they were becoming, going back to when they won the Champions League to earn their place in the Club World Cup. But they do finally seem to be getting there. They've made some big decisions along the way, but now I think it's starting to bear fruit and they need to get off to a good start. And there's a good chance of that because the fixture list looks reasonably friendly for them. So I think that the start to this Premier League season will show us whether this side have transformed into a side that can genuinely challenge again for the Premier League title.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Well, it's Chelsea's transformation done. We'll take a little break there. When we come back, we'll be looking at some other teams who are having potentially transformative summers for good or for bad. Stick with us here on Ranks FC. Hello, Rank Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.
Ever notice how ads always pop up at the worst moments? When the killer's identity is about to be revealed. During that perfect meditation flow. On Amazon Music, we believe in keeping you in the moment. That's why we've got millions of ad-free podcast episodes, so you can stay completely immersed in every story, every reveal, every breath. Download the Amazon Music app and start listening to your favorite podcasts ad-free, included with Prime.
Welcome back to Ranks FC, where we're talking transformative summers and ranking some of the clubs who are having them. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Dean Jones for a couple of honourable mentions and a mini ranking.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the longer I started to look at this, the more teams I suddenly started to consider whether they are transformed from last season and whether I include them in the ranking. And it actually became a lot more difficult than I initially thought. It's helped having Chelsea in the first section of the pod today because it means I don't have to include them in this ranking. So don't get mad at me, Chelsea fans, but that's why I'm not going to speak about you here. And what was going to be a top 3 kind of became a top 5. And even then, I still had a couple of honourable mentions. And the 2 honourable mentions are going to be Liverpool and Everton, actually. Now, Liverpool are transforming squad-wise, obviously, but I mean, they are the Premier League champions. So, I still think that they are going to be in the race to be Premier League champions. So, I don't know that you can transform from to being something that you already are. Even if it's on the pitch, they will look different and they will play differently. But for this particular ranking, I was like, I'm not sure enough has changed. And we've spoken obviously on ranks many times before across this summer about the personnel changes, obviously the tragedy of Diogo Jota, and of the way that the tactical changes are going to be implemented under Arne Slot as they now try to defend their title and also go into European competition, and all the other issues that are going to come their way as they try to do that. So transformative, yes, because they look different on the pitch, but not really transformative in terms of what they can achieve. Everton, I thought, was really interesting when I was looking into it, because I was like, well, they are transformed because they're in a completely new house. They are playing at a new spot. They have a new stadium, and they have a manager in David Moyes who is probably just going to calm the place down and who can be trusted. And so I think in that sense, Everton are transformed. Dominic Calvert-Lewin being gone as well is a transformation, because they've always had the potential of him doing well, but also have been held back by him being injured at the same time. So I think that that's transformative in itself. And what I think we're now seeing as well with Everton is, and we'll see it more across the rest of the transfer window, is that they will start to make some good signings. Now, another reason I can't totally include them in this ranking is because they've got potential to make some more good signings, but they haven't actually done them yet. Tiano Barry, though, who arrived as the first big signing of the summer from Villarreal, does seem to be a good signing for Everton and could be transformative. So, yeah, I feel like they are worth a mention here. And they were fifth until I spoke to another journalist about an hour ago, and he was like, oh, I would actually put this team in ahead of them. So they just didn't make the cut right at the last minute.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that it feels like it has a potential to be transformative as much as, and some of these have been really hard to kind of work out what they're doing in terms of, is it already transformative? Have we seen it happen already? Like someone like a Roma I was going to include at one point. I was like, they actually haven't signed anyone yet. They've just cleared out the deadwood. And that kind of feels like it's a weird place to have a discussion about when nothing's actually happened in that regard. So it is hard to kind of work out exactly what this is in terms of where teams are right now. But we'll try and do our best. So I think Everton are a good one to have given an honourable mention in this regard.
Yeah. And at number 5, it's a team that is clearly transformed because it's Sunderland. Now, this is a team that came up via the playoffs somewhat unexpectedly. And since the playoffs have lost one of their star players in Joe Bellingham, but also have broken their transfer record a couple of times and have made some good signings. I mean, they got Enzo Lafay over the line. They got Simon Adingra and they got Habib Diarra. And they are not finished yet either. So from speaking to people, I would expect them to sign a striker. I think that they'll really look to pad this squad out with some more quality. And so when you consider where they were and what would have been expected of them in that moment when they got to the Premier League, which is instant relegation, I think obviously they're still going to be in the relegation conversation. But for me, for example, they've done more than Leeds at this point. Now, Leeds still intend to do big business and maybe they end up jumping Sunderland by the time the season starts. But as we sit right now, I think that Sunderland are doing well in transforming themselves, which was obviously completely necessary.
Yeah, 100%. And then look, it was always going to be quite interesting. And I always find that the club who ends up coming up through the playoffs gets the least amount of time, right? Because they know that they're not up automatically. The playoffs last, 2 weeks on top of everything else. And you can't plan for it because there has to be 2 different scenarios. So the fact that they've moved so quickly on the start of the season, having, had less time than Burnley and Leeds, for example, because they weren't able to plan from, when were Burnley and Leeds confirmed as coming up? Like end of April, start of May. And you have to wait all the way through to the end of the playoffs in order to guarantee yourselves what your strategy is going to be. So from that perspective, I think it's been really interesting what they've been doing. And the fact that they have been so quick out of the blocks is a testament, I think, to the fact that they don't want this to be a flash in the pan. And they'd have seen that the 3 promoted sides have gone down the last 2 years in the Premier League. These 3 teams will have ideas, and I think we've seen from all of them to an extent, but Sunderland perhaps the most, this idea that they don't want that to be the case. They want to be in there, and this doesn't want to be a kind of cut the promoted sides adrift again. And I think that that's a good thing for the Premier League generally. Obviously, as a team who sits in mid-table and a fan of a team who sits in mid-table, it's always a little bit uncomfortable watching it happen and being like, oh, is it going to be a trickier year? Is it going to be a more stressful year in terms of staying up, etc.? But I think for the kind of general health of the Premier League, that is a good thing. The teams are coming up and looking to be competitive right from the outset. Now, it doesn't always work, and guarantee it won't work for all 3 of these teams, but there is a level of it that I think that's a really good place to be and a really good place to start. So shouts out to Sunderland.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving on to number 4, it's a club that they're going to have a rivalry with this season in Newcastle United, who obviously have ambitions deeper than just staying in the league. They believe at some point they'll be able to win this league. But it's quite fitting today too that we talk about Newcastle within this ranking, because suddenly things have really kicked into gear. And with the transfer rumours that have been thrown up, this really could be even more transformative than some might have imagined. So Newcastle obviously always craving Champions League football, always craving bringing in star players while also clinging on to their own stars. But I've been saying for months that I thought that the Alex Isak situation looked dangerous for them. And I've been somewhat surprised that they've let the contract situation rumble on so long, because they have so clearly addressed him as one of the best forwards in the world, while he does not earn a wage that is reflective of that status, and they haven't moved to put him onto a wage that would be that. Now, you could argue, say, well, Newcastle can't go and pay Isak 250 grand a week. They could. And they haven't. And now, Liverpool seem to have a sniff that actually Isak is gettable. Now, Arsenal didn't get involved in this race because they thought that he would be too expensive and perhaps even not attainable. But I also wonder if Arsenal knew somewhere deep down that he might prefer Liverpool. Just a hunch. But this obviously ties in too with the fact that Newcastle have made an offer for Hugo Ekitike of £70 million, which is short of where Eintracht Frankfurt currently position him. They want him €100 million for him, which I think is about £86 million. And Newcastle didn't go in quite as high as that so far. I think they'll offer again, and I think they'll do it quite fast, maybe even by the time people are listening to this. But the problem is that Liverpool also have an interest in Hugo Ekitike. Now, so Newcastle have got 2 fights on their hands here, one to get Ekitike through the door and one to make sure that Isak doesn't go out the door, because this wasn't really a case of Newcastle going for Ekitike as a replacement for Isak. Like, the dream scenario was they could have both, because that's the sort of club that they want to become. I think that that's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible to do. But if you're talking about transformations, then that would be a huge transformation if they were able to put something like that together in their attack. Obviously, already got Anthony Elanga through the door. Missed out on a couple of signings so far this summer, but this would go a long way to making up for that. There's going to be more to come. They're going to sign a centre-back of some significance. And Eddie Howe clearly is trying to define a way to get this team playing in an attractive manner, and also one that the Newcastle fans are proud of. So, yeah, I just find it all extremely intriguing. And one of the reasons, too, that they're trying to get Ekitike and also keep Isak is that they want to show players like Anthony Gordon and Bruno Guimaraes that they should stay at Newcastle, that they shouldn't leave. So, with all that in mind, I just felt that Newcastle had to be in this list. And because it hasn't all quite fallen into place yet, I didn't put them any higher than this. But by the time we get to the start of the season, who knows?
Just in terms of that, like there's a couple of things here. One, obviously, Ekitike has played in a front two for most of his time at Eintracht Frankfurt, obviously first with Omar Marmoush, but with a variety of different players. And I do wonder if there is something in the idea of playing them as a pair. Now, it would probably mean that Newcastle had to play with either a 4-4-2 shape, which is bold and asking a lot from your central midfielders. But if it is Tonali and Bruno, we know that they cover ground, and Joe Linton can slide in there as well. There is probably a world where you could see Alex Isak operating slightly more off the left-hand side, or with Ekitike operating as slightly deeper and maybe more of a 10, but it means still dropping that midfielder in some ways. Like, there is part of me that wonders if Liverpool come in and they get completely and utterly knocked back for Alexander Isak, they might be like, oh, we've just lost Luis Diaz. What about Anthony Gordon? And, if Newcastle kind of make it work in that regard. But I did see something from Umir on Twitter. If you don't follow him on Twitter, Umir F1, brilliant football analyst. And he was like, I think Liverpool are playing 4D chess here. They've gone in and shown interest in Ekitike, and Newcastle have been eyeing him up for a while. We know that that's something that they've had on their kind of long-term agendas, but they see him as a potential star of the future, but also they've got Isak at the moment. And if Ekitike goes to Liverpool this summer, let's just say, then there is a chance that Alexander Isak leaves Newcastle next season, right? Like, it's not that he's there forever and ever. And I'm not saying he will. I'm just saying, are they basically going, we could probably do with getting him, because if Isak does decide to leave, then at least we've got a ready-made replacement already through the door, and potentially opening that door for an Isak departure. Like, that's where this gets really interesting, with clubs kind of trying to play off each other a little bit. And I think maybe the most interesting bit of all of this.
Yeah, I mean, if they give Isak what he should be commanding in terms of a wage, then I think the player's perfectly happy to be there. And especially if they can continue to be competitive and challenging for trophies, being in that top four, I think that he would be fine to stay. Obviously, like, Liverpool's still the next step up, and there's always going to be that temptation if a bid comes in to actually go for it. And it's not going to go away, even if he does sign a new contract. But if he was to commit, I'd kind of believe in it, to be honest, from what I hear. But obviously, Liverpool are not very popular around Newcastle at the moment. Like you say, three of their best players in Gordon, Isak, and, well, I'm calling Ekitike one of their players. He's not one of their players yet, and that deal could definitely be hijacked, not just by Liverpool.
Might never be, yeah, exactly.
But even by, perhaps Chelsea too. And I know that they are cautious of all of this. But it's very interesting. Now, I think what's also got to be transformative is how convincing they are as a team next season, and whether they convince us that they are now a top team in this league, because the competition is going to be really rough next time around, because all the teams around them are strengthening, and you've got to keep up that consistency and the momentum and the squad harmony and all these different things. And Eddie Howe's got a tough job on his hands to do that. So in that sense too, there needs to be a big transformation. So yeah, I think this is where I'm going to settle for them.
Question on Newcastle. Obviously, we've seen them spend relatively big on Elanga already. Now, whether you think that's a good or a bad deal is completely up to you, but I'm not completely sold on it. But they've spent big on that. They're now putting money on the table for Ekitike. We've not seen them make a big sale. Is this the start of Newcastle being able to utilise the cash that's clearly available to them from their new owners, or new in inverted commas, from their ownership? Is this the change? Because we've seen them kind of struggling against that PSR barricade for quite some time. It doesn't look like it's having quite the same effect this season. Last season we saw them selling Elliot Anderson to Nottingham Forest to try and break the deadline, and Vlaco Dimos going the other way, and all of those things kind of happening. We've seen them, have a bid knocked back for James Trafford. We've seen them going in and getting involved in a variety of deals. Is this Newcastle unleashed?
A little bit. I mean, I still think there's some caution here, and they're not completely going for it because they could take this to a different level. And I think if that were the case, why wouldn't they already have Mark Gahey through the door, for example? They would have just like paid what it takes to give him the personal demands he might have, and to give Crystal Palace the fee that they might have for a player, even though his contract's expiring. So I still think there are limitations to it. But it'll be interesting with this Ekitike deal to see if they're willing to go and meet the demand that is there from Frankfurt. I mean, personally, I think 100 million euros is too much. And clearly they do too. And I still think that they'll try to drop another offer in beneath that level. I don't think that they'll go as high as that. But you are seeing them here spending at a level that's going to set a new transfer record. So in that sense, yeah, I guess that there is some evidence that they're starting to do that.
Okay, it'll be an interesting one. Should we move on to number 3?
Number 3, I don't think these guys would have been on the list maybe even a week ago, maybe a bit longer, but Tottenham Hotspur have made my list because they are transformed in actually every sense now. Obviously, they've got that trophy under their belt at the end of last season, Europa League, so that's good. They then made a managerial change, so that's transformed. They've gone from Ange Postecoglou to Thomas Frank. And they've also gone and signed Mohamed Kudus and got a good deal out of it, actually, well beneath his release clause and perhaps even underneath the actual valuation of where some clubs might have been happy to pay for him. So that's a transformation. And then obviously straight on the back of it went and tried to make a splash by getting Morgan Gibbs-White. And obviously that's tied up in legal tape at the moment as Forest try to block that move. But that was a statement in itself. And, however cheeky they might have been in terms of finding out about the clause, that's a statement too. And that's probably a good sign for Tottenham fans that their side are transformed because, a lot of criticism has been aimed at Daniel Levy over time and even was getting it, in the first month of this transfer window for not spending. But going back to back on Kudus and Gibbs-White was suddenly took everyone a step back. And I don't think they're done yet. Even we'll see what happens with Gibbs-White. Still being told it will probably happen, but obviously we're all kind of guessing at the moment because we can't predict the outcome of whatever it is that Nottingham Forest are going to try to prove in court. But like that central midfielder that they want, who's more of a number 6, if they were to sign someone really significant in that position, Adam Wharton is definitely somebody that's been mentioned as a central midfielder. João Palhinha is somebody that they've kind of put the feelers out on just to see what would be needed there and whether he would be interested in it. Like, these are pretty significant moves for Tottenham to be making in bolstering their squad. And given that we already thought that they were building a good team, that they had good foundations in place, that they've got young players who are going to break out over the next 2-3 years, they're getting into quite a good place. And considering that have been a laughing stock at times, and last season, as they hung around the bottom end of the Premier League and Ange Postecoglou set new records for defeats and stuff, it wasn't a great time. But I think the optimism can be genuine right now for Tottenham. And that certainly hasn't been the case. Even going into the Europa League final, you kind of feared the worst as a Spurs fan. And I just wonder if that's changed now already. And they're not even finished with their summer business. You'll expect this team to be competing at the right end of the Premier League this time around. And I'll be very surprised if they weren't. So Tottenham at number 3 as teams that I think are transformed.
Yeah, I think this is it. It's a bit of sun breaking through the clouds, isn't it? Because there were mixed emotions about getting rid of Ange Postecoglou and bringing in Thomas Frank, someone obviously who's got an incredible record with what he did with Brentford, but equally hasn't kind of been at the sharp end of the table. And Spurs fans, I think, a little bit all over the place with that decision, but it feels like it's being backed up. And the optimism you're seeing start to abound from Spurs fans is something that we haven't seen in quite the same way for some time. So I think you're absolutely right on this one. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do with the rest of this summer, especially, as you say, with that kind of midfield role that's a bit deeper. Do they need a Morgan Gibbs-White? I think is a different question, but the fact that they've gone out there and got involved in that conversation probably speaks to exactly where they feel like they want to be and the conversations they want to be in. And I think that we'll see how that pans out with whoever they decide that they are going to sign in that kind of deeper midfield role. But it does feel like a very, very bright summer from a Spurs perspective so far, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Right. Number 2 is different because at number 2 is Brentford. Now, all the transformations I've spoken of so far are positive ones. And I'm not sure that Brentford are going through a positive transformation. And whatever way you want to look at it, there's been a big transformation, so they deserve to be at number 2 anyway, because they no longer have Thomas Frank as their manager, who had proven himself to be one of the most consistent and most admired managers in the league. And they're now switching to Keith Andrews, who's never managed a Premier League game in his life. That's a big switch. They are waiting to find out if Brian Mbeumo leaves, who is their best player. They've already lost Norgard, who was their other best player. And they might lose Johan Visser, who is their other best player.
There's a lot of other best players going on.
They had quite a few good players.
I think Nathan Collins mentioned. I think he's their best player.
Yeah, there you go. But if Brentford do end up in a situation here whereby they've got a brand new manager into the league without 3 of their best players from last season, then that is hugely significant. And then you look at the business that's being done, and Jordan Henderson's just been announced as a signing for Brentford. It just doesn't feel very Brentford to me, any of this. Like, they've been so consistent and it's all been good and positive and on the up. And this just all must feel quite scary, to be honest, as a Brentford fan, that this is the year that it potentially falls apart. Now, they'll desperately try to hold on to Visser if they do lose Mbeumo to Man United. But Tottenham have already got interest in Visser. Newcastle even have some interest in Visser. And I still think there'll be some sort of offer for him this summer. So it'll be interesting to see whether he actually goes. But I think Norgard's a big loss. I don't completely understand why they've had to lose Norgard for a relatively low fee. The money that he's gone for, I can't believe they couldn't get a bit more out of that deal. He only signed a new contract recently. It's so important. I mean, at Brentford, he was basically Thomas Frank's ears and eyes on the pitch. He's always worked with him. So to lose Frank, who's kind of the overlord off the pitch, and lose this guy, Norgard, on the pitch, really, really significant. And there's just a lot to overcome here. So very, very intrigued to see how Brentford deal with what's going on across this summer.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think they've upgraded in goal in Quaveen Kelleher coming in for Mark Flecken, and they've done that for relatively little money. I think they got about 8.5 for Flecken, and they've spent about 12.5 on Kelleher, which feels like a really smart bit of business. They've made Michael Coyote permanent, which felt like they've been crying out for a right back for quite some time, so that made sense. And look, there is something going on at Brentford, which is quite hard to quantify, I think. The reason I think that Jordan Henderson has come in is to fill the leadership vacuum in the squad, because Norgard going out, obviously club captain, but also Ben Mee leave. Now, Ben Mee didn't play very much last year, but was kind of respected as one of the big voices in the dressing room. And I wonder if Jordan Henderson is coming in here to help a rookie manager out, someone he can lean on in terms of experience. And also there's a fair Liverpool contingent within this group, right? Because not only has Kelleher come in this summer, but obviously Fabio Carvalho is there, Sepp van den Berg Højbjerg is there. Now Henderson joins as well. So there's something kind of going on there in terms of bringing players back together who know each other and will be able to kind of build that straight away. Anthony Malambo I really like as a signing. He's played mostly as a number 10 for Feyenoord, but his defensive numbers are better than his attacking numbers. So I feel like he might be someone that ends up moving backwards. I don't know how much Henderson is going to play, because Vitaly Janelt plays in there, Yarmolenko plays in there. And I think that the thing with, they're taking a risk, right, with Mbeumo or potentially Vissa and potentially both leaving. But equally, you do look at what happened last year, the back end of last year, Kevin Schade started to step up. Igor Thiago was signed as the kind of, he was signed as the replacement for Ivan Toney. And he just got injured straight away and we didn't see any of him. But that's going to be a big part, I think, of Brentford's season. And you're starting to see, you'll be like, okay, so what does this look like next time out? What does this look like? Damsgaard looks like he's going to stay. He had his kind of breakout moment finally after a couple of years of really struggling. So I think the thing with Brentford is I kind of trust Phil Giles and Matthew Benham to get this right. Now, Benham has also sold some of his shares today. We've seen some investment within Brentford. I don't know what that means in terms of overall control and how much of a say he gets to have, but he's usually kind of delegated to real football people as well. Part of the stats stuff, he's always monitored and always managed 100%, but Phil Giles has been such a big presence in that dressing room and in that kind of overarching off the pitch bit, the back office in so many ways. So like if anyone was going to get this right, and especially if they get a boatload of money in for Mbeumo and Vissa, then I kind of trust them to spend it correctly. But there's absolutely no doubt that this is going to be a very different looking Brentford team and that it's going to, it feels like a risk, right? And look, you have to take calculated gambles. I get that. And they're trying to get money in for players who, you know, potentially they wouldn't get that money for in a year's time. Whether it all needs to happen in the same summer as they move away from a manager who's been transformational in his own right for a club is maybe a different question. But I do think that, you know, you do have to keep moving forward and you do have to keep trying to kind of reinvest, and standing still is falling incredibly backwards. They're taking a huge risk, no doubt about that whatsoever. But I, you know, have kind of come to trust them in terms of the fact that they tend to get these things right. Yeah,
that's fair enough. We'll wait to see. Let's move on to number one. It's Arsenal. The transformation is not complete as we record this, but I do believe that the moves that they are going to make on top of the ones they've already made put them in a position where they probably deserve to be on top of this pile. This is a team that are kind of adopting a win now mentality. It's got to happen. They've had to level up because coming second, being the nearly men is frustrating and can quickly fall away. So they've had to go and push the boat out here. They've signed Kepa in goal for a good value deal.
5 million as a backup keeper. That's a great bit of business.
It's a great deal. As just mentioned, they've got Norgard in from Brentford. Another really good deal, like really good value on that one as well. And someone that's proven himself in the Premier League. Great signing. They've also got Martin Zubimendi, a midfielder who's one of the best in his position in the world. So that helps, as we talked about before, helps unlock Declan Rice a bit more too. So you get more out of him. That's all good. You've got Noni Madueke, who perhaps even by the time this podcast is going out has been signed and sealed, but he's been doing his medical and all the legalities of the deal this week. Obviously some negative headlines around that and some negative comments from Arsenal fans, petitions, no to Madueke and all this sort of stuff. It's all got a bit silly and out of hand, really. As you pointed out,
it's a bit ridiculous, right? Like it's just one of those where, like, he's like, should they have done this in a different order? Should they have potentially got the number 9 through the door first? Would this look a bit different?
You can't always choose that, right? I mean, I don't know why Madueke was prioritized to be a signing ahead of the ones that haven't come through the door yet.
I wonder if they just saw the opportunity and took it as opposed to anything else, right? And look, Madueke is a really, really talented footballer. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And I think what's going to be interesting about this is how many minutes he gets. I don't know if this is a great move for Noni Madueke, like, to be perfectly honest with you. But I think that in terms of a depth option for Arsenal, in terms of someone who can change a game, like it makes lots of sense. I get the frustration around signing players from Chelsea, and there's been a kind of less than 50% hit rate over the course of Mikel Arteta's tenure with, I think it's 7 now, will be 7 with Madueke coming in. So like, I understand the frustrations around elements of that, and I kind of understand the frustrations around spending 50 million on a player who's going to be potentially a part of the rotation. But I do think in terms of depth and actually bringing in a little bit of X factor and seeing what else they do, if they continue, and this is one of 7 signings this summer, I think that's a perfectly good deal from an Arsenal perspective in terms of they've signed a player there who whilst I don't think that they should have maybe prioritized in terms of this part of the window, they've gone, here's a market opportunity and one we're going to take. So I can understand why they've done it. I'm just not 100% sure from his perspective if he's going to get the game time and the consistent game time that perhaps he needs to actually hit that next level.
Yeah. I mean, Arsenal as a football club certainly believe that some of the headlines around who he actually is as a person are exaggerated and wrong. And equally, they do not believe that the negative vibe that has so far existed mainly on the internet is going to be mirrored inside Emirates Stadium once he's wearing an Arsenal shirt. And that's an important thing to factor in.
And they're probably right.
And they're probably right. I don't think he's going to be walk out for his first game getting booed by the Emirates and everyone's shouting no to Madueke. Like, that's not going to happen.
Also, that would be absolutely ridiculous for it. That would be absolutely pure nonsense.
Exactly. Anyway, so to complete the transformation, they need Gyökeres through the door. And they will then need one of Eze or Rodrigo. And Gyökeres looks like it'll be done. And wow, let's see what happens with the last one. If I was to guess right now, I'd say Eze has the edge over Rodrigo as becoming that signing. But either way, if it's one of the two, it doesn't really matter. You're definitely leveling up as to what you have within your armory to go on and try to win the Premier League / Champions League / whatever else you want to get your hands on. And yeah, it really is that win now kind of feeling around Arsenal that they've needed to exist. It felt like it was there at times last season that everyone was believing in it. There are still people that don't trust Arteta to go and get the job done. So he's got to kind of prove that too. But yeah, I'm taking him seriously right now. And I think that Arsenal are transformed into a club that can maybe go and win the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's time to deliver, right? There's been endless phases, and I know that's frustrated some people. Sometimes you have to build it from the bottom up, and Arteta has frustrated people with the kind of moves he's made at times. But I think you can kind of see the logic between some of it. Should they have gone and signed a number 9 last year? Yes, but like equally, you kind of look at it and think that there is a space there where they've gone, okay, it's been defensive issues or defensive injuries that have plagued us the season before. How do we address that before we address anything else? And they've gone and made sensible signings over the course of most of this. Not all of them have worked, but the majority have. It does feel like this is a big summer and one that's going to be very, very impactful from an Arsenal perspective. I think you're absolutely right.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, so that's my little list.
There is your list. Thank you very much. We're going to take a little break there. When we come back, I've got a couple from across Europe that I want to just touch on quickly. Don't go anywhere. Hello, Rag Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.
Welcome back to Ranks FC, where Jack's going to quickly fly us into Europe and tell us about a couple of situations over there.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's some really interesting ones. I think that Monaco are really interesting. Ansu Fati in on loan with a potential option to buy. Paul Pogba coming back and making his return at Monaco, and combined with what they did in January with Mika Biereth and some of the kind of firepower they have at their disposal, I'm really intrigued by them. They're a team that I'm going to be watching very, very closely at the start of the season. I mentioned, obviously, in the last part that Roma feel like they have the potential to be transformative. They're clearing out the decks. Obviously, Zalewski was out on loan last season, as was Tammy Abraham, but they've gone off again. Leandro Paredes has gone off on a free. Mats Hummels was retired. Eldor Shomurodov leaving. It looks like Evan Ferguson might be close to going through the door. Evan Ferguson's numbers juiced by Gianpiero Gasperini. Thank you very much. I will be taking that for the Republic of Ireland. So I'm excited to see what happens, but it doesn't feel like it's transformative, if you say it, until it happens. And I think that we're seeing the start of it at Milan, right? Obviously, Tijani Reinder's out the door, Teo Hernandez out the door, and Sergio Conceição out the door. In comes Luka Modric. That's a done deal now. And Samuele Ricci, which I think is a really good bit of business from a Milan perspective. But there still feels like there's loads to go with Milan, right? Like, it still feels like there could be some other significant departures in that squad. Yeah. Obviously, Rafael's gone a little bit quiet at the moment, but that was one mooted earlier in the summer. We know that there are kind of potential suitors in Napoli for Yunus Musa. So what happens here with Milan, I think, is going to be very interesting, and especially with Allegri coming in there, that's going to be intriguing as well. And also what happens at RB Leipzig with Oli Werner coming in from Werder Bremen. They feel like they have the potential to lose a couple of key players. Yusuf Poulsen's already out the door. He's gone to Hamburg, which I think is loads of fun for what it's worth. Elias Mariba's loan was made permanent at Celta Vigo, but feels like Xavi Simons could go. It feels like Šeško could go. It feels like Openda could go. They've obviously started to move on some interesting deals as well. So Leipzig are one to keep an eye on, but all of those feel like they're just getting started. So I wanted to quickly just touch on a couple of things. And I want to start at 3 with Como, because this is transformation in a different sense. They haven't lost a single player yet this summer, bar the ones that were out on loan and have been made permanent. But look about their window last summer, Dean. And they brought in a load of really experienced players, right? Andrea Bellotti came through the door. Alberto De Sena came through the door from Cagliari. We saw them, make the permanent purchase of Strefeza, who's still a big part of this. Pepe Reina, Alberto Moreno, Rafael Varane, Emil Aldero, Sergi Roberto. So they made a couple of young signings. Nico Paz was kind of the big one. But it felt like they were like, right, we need experience in this squad to get us through. And then suddenly in January, it starts to turn a little bit, right? They start to just change it a tad. Asana Diao comes in, 19 from Real Betis. They bring in Kakare, 24 from Lyon, which felt like a really smart sign at the time. But it's still a little bit all over the place. They still bring in Vojvoda from Torino, who's 30 years old. They bring Butez from Antwerp, the keeper, who's 29. And you're kind of like, okay, what are you doing? The signings this summer have been thus. They've brought in Jesus Rodriguez from Real Betis, club record fee at about 18, 19 million pounds, under 21 years old at this point. So he's currently 19. Nicholas Kuhn comes in, the oldest of the lot at 24. And you're like, okay, cool. That's a big signing, but he's also a player who's, proved it not only in the Champions League with Celtic this season, but has been very, very effective, I think, after a slow start at Celtic. Martin Baturina, who's potentially one of the brightest playmaking talents in the entirety of Europe from Dinamo Zagreb, comes in 22 years old. And then Jadon Adai comes in from RZ Alkmaar, another 19-year-old winger. And then they make the permanent deals of Alex Valle from Barcelona and Felipe Jack from Palmeiras. So you're looking at these signings thinking 21, 22, 19, 19, 19, 24. Wow, okay. That's a change of pace. That's a major change of pace in terms of how they're going about their business in transfer markets. And you can point out the fact that the experience is now through the door. But a lot of players have also left, right? Like we saw Pepe Reina retire. We saw Iovene retire. We saw a couple of the kind of bigger, older names depart. And you're like, okay, where are you going with this? Obviously, Varane retired halfway through last season. So the change in attitude and the change of direction in terms of who they're trying to bring in. Now, they spent a lot of money. They've already spent about 80 million euros in just this summer alone without anybody going out. That's a big deal in terms of what they're putting together. But I am really intrigued by their kind of strategy in the transfer market. And I think that transformation from a team picking up veterans last summer to a team trying to pick up the cream of the crop in terms of young players in Europe who are looking for their next move to kind of project them into the spotlight is a really intriguing one from them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was important probably to get that foundation laid and show everybody they meant business and give them a bit of time to focus on what was actually going to get them to where they wanted to be long term.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Let's go to Germany quickly for Bayer Leverkusen. Now, we talked about ups and downs. This is a big, big summer for Bayer Leverkusen. Now, obviously, Xabi Alonso leaves. More on him in a minute. Hint, hint. Florian Wirtz, Jeremy Frimpong, Jonathan Tah. 3 players who were all absolutely imperative to the last 2 successful campaigns that Bayer Leverkusen have had. And 3 players who are pretty much part of the heartbeat of how it was all working. So in comes Erik ten Hag, Malik Tillman, Jarrell Quansah, Ibrahim Maza, who's really, really exciting as a footballer, and Mark Flecken in goal, and Abdoulaye Faye as well. And you're looking at that going, okay, how's this going to shift? What does this look like next season? Now, I don't think Erik ten Hag is necessarily going to stick with the system that Xabi Alonso had in at Bayer Leverkusen, but this is big risks and potentially big reward. Malik Tillman comes in now basically to inherit, now maybe he doesn't take the shirt straight away, but inherit the number 10 shirt to become the kind of creative fulcrum and try and step up to the plate in the way that Florian Wirtz did. That is big pressure on Malik Tillman. And look, he's put in some really, really impressive performances in his time at PSV. Jarrell Quansah basically filling the Jonathan Tah role in that team. And I think that, you're looking at this and thinking, this is a summer that has the potential to make or break Leverkusen, because if they spend this money well and this works, it's a massive, massive job here for Erik ten Hag, not just in terms of what he has to do and trying to pull a sort of slightly disparate squad back together and also potentially instill a new system in them, but his reputation's on the line as well. They've taken a big gamble here on someone who didn't have the best time of it at Manchester United, didn't have the worst time either, but didn't have the best time of it, whose kind of name got dragged through the mud a bit after such a successful time at Ajax. And suddenly Leverkusen look very, very different. He's going to be able to put his own stamp on it, his own spin on what this team look like. But this is a risky business as well, as we said with Brentford, losing 3 of your best players there in Wirtz, Frimpong and Tah and Xabi Alonso. Draw the parallels if you like. It's not completely the same, but they've been able to kind of move quite quickly and gamble on some players with huge potential upsides. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see what this Leverkusen side look like next year.
Yeah, definitely. And the spotlight's on him, so that adds another layer of intrigue, doesn't it? Because from a worldwide standing, like, everyone's intrigued to see whether he's actually any good. So time will tell.
Time will tell, indeed. But yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on Leverkusen. And talking of Xabi Alonso, has anybody had a more transformative summer than Real Madrid at this point? So out go Victor Munoz on a really strange deal where he's gone out with Real Madrid having a buyback clause for 3 years of a 5-year contract. I think that's going to be one to sort of keep a lid on in some ways, because there's a lot of Real Madrid fans who are a little bit upset that Victor Munoz has been allowed to depart the club. But Luka Modric leaves alongside Carlo Ancelotti. In comes Xabi Alonso, and immediately you see the moves start to take place. So Trent Alexander-Arnold and Dean Huyson come in, Franco Mastantuono comes in, and Alvaro Carreras, who is confirmed today. So there's going to be more movement at Real Madrid. They're not going to start the season, I imagine, with 3 left-backs on the books, 3 specialist left-backs as well, we should probably add. But Huyson, we saw the impact immediately in terms of what he could do in the Club World Cup. Trent Alexander-Arnold is going to take some time to settle, but I think he will be absolutely fine. And Mastantuono is one of the most highly regarded players in world football, young players in world football right now, and one of the most exciting prospects as well. So Real Madrid have had already a pretty wild summer, and in some of the names that have been signed here. But equally, it doesn't feel like they're anywhere near finished. This feels like the start of the turnover rather than the end. And that, for me, is the most intriguing thing about this, because that feels, and it kind of looked a little bit like a club transformed. Now, not all in a good way in the Club World Cup. There were still bits of this that aren't put together properly yet, that the team doesn't feel cohesive, etc. But immediately you could see the stall come in and change. And you mentioned the fact that manager changes often have a bigger impact than squad ones at this point. And I feel like this move to Xabi Alonso away from a Carlo Ancelotti side that have relied on individual ability as well as kind of a cohesiveness and a belief in their own character, into into a Xabi Alonso side that are going to be more technical, are going to be more kind of instructed, I think is probably the word I would use. There are still loads and loads and loads of work to do here, and how he gets this front line to press, hassle, harry, is going to be one of the big question marks that stays over him until this season starts and we either get an answer one way or another. But I think that in terms of transformative starts to a summer, very few teams have had one as kind of dramatic, shall we say, as this.
Oh, you got me all excited there about the start of the new season, mate. Yeah, not long now, and we'll be tuning in, making sure we've got all the different channels we need for all these different leagues. But yeah, Real Madrid are up against it, I'd say, at this particular moment. Given some of the lessons that they learned in the Club World Cup, given all of the narrative around Mbappe, and it's going to be fun. But Barcelona will sniff blood here, and they'll feel that they can go and can take on this league again. And because of the unsettled nature of Madrid at the moment, Barca will be hoping Madrid starts slowly. But let's see what Xabi Alonso can work out in the next few weeks.
Yeah, big job on his hands. Big job for the man who's taken over him at Leverkusen and Erik ten Hag, and a very interesting time of it at Como to wrap us all up. And with that, I think it's probably time for us to call it a day here on Ranks FC. So all that's left for me to do is say thank you very, very much to Mr. Dean Jones.
Cheers, mate.
I've been Jack Collins. Thank you all so much for listening as ever. We really do appreciate you all, Rank Squad. Thank you so much for sticking by us through this summer. We can't wait for football to get started again and get stuck in to the meat and bones of a new season. We'll see you all next week, gang. Take it easy. Peace. Hello, Rag Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Allo or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not so secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret. Businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.